right, hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Thursday, September 8th, 2022. This is your daily tropical update. Rolling a video here this afternoon. Got a little bit of time on our hands. Feel bad, I haven't had a lot of time for the updates lately, but wanted to give you guys something decent today. We are looking at a pretty active Atlantic basin. We are, of course, just days away from the statistical peak of the hurricane season, which is around September 10th to September 11th. As far as like how much activity we actually see in a given season, that's pretty much your midway peak of the season. So no surprise that we have several active storms across the world. We have Hurricane Earl as the active storm in the Atlantic. We have Hurricane Kay just off screen as the active storm in the Eastern Pacific, and we have a system in the Western Pacific that's also going to be a threat over the coming days. So we have a couple different things and a few other storms in areas of interest as well. So just in the Atlantic, we have Hurricane Earl right here south of Bermuda, Invest 95L that was close to becoming a tropical depression, but that window might have just shut. And we also have another wave leaving Africa that's going to pull northwest in the coming days and follow 95L. And the broad brush, none of these systems actually directly threaten the eastern U.S. The biggest impact for the eastern U.S. over the next couple of days is this frontal boundary and upper level low over the Gulf. A lot of rainfall with this, but definitely no tropical threats on the radar anytime real soon. We always watch the Gulf of Mexico when you have these large frontal boundaries kind of hanging out. Sometimes things can develop. I don't think that's going to happen in this case, but something we'll watch. But again, no specific threat, nothing marked by the Hurricane Center. Speaking of them, let's go ahead and look at their 5-day tropical outlook. Hurricane Danielle became post-tropical today, so that's no longer a named storm. She spent a lot of time over the northern Atlantic basin and is eventually moved off. She'll complete a counterclockwise loop, and her remnants will drift towards the Iberian Peninsula. That's Portugal and Spain, if my geography serves me. And will bring some rain to them, but no significant storm-related impacts. But that system is no longer tropical and no longer named. Of course, we have Earl, and we have our two Invest, so we'll kind of go in that order. We have the latest on Hurricane Earl from National Hurricane Season Center, 2 o'clock this afternoon update. Maximum sustained winds are 105 miles an hour. Earl's the strongest storm of the season so far in the basin. He's moving to the north-northeast at 13 miles an hour. We can see the tiny island of Bermuda has tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches up. Earl is expected to be a major hurricane here by tonight or early tomorrow. Again, 105 is still Category 2, but Category 3 starts at 115, so we're not far off that major hurricane intensity, and Earl is expected to achieve that and become the first major hurricane of the 2022 Atlantic season as it passes about 75 to 100 miles southeast of Bermuda. Satellite presentation of Earl this afternoon is pretty good. It's definitely improving over the last couple of hours. We can see even on the true color the clouds filling in around that eye. It was kind of ragged earlier today. You had this dry air band kind of wrapped in, but Earl is closing that off. It shows that better on infrared satellite imagery. We can see these bursts of blacks showing how the clouds around the eye are clearing out. So if I slow this down, if we go back to the beginning of the loop, you can see there's a noted dry slot right here in the eye, and there's this big burst of convection that's slowly working around the center of the storm. So you have your eye right here, and this burst kind of wraps around, and you can see how that begins to curl up, and then those clouds in the last couple frames are now building in a more symmetrical layer on the eye. That's that central dense overcast beginning to build, and when the storm is wrapping around the eye and closing off, it's indicating that the storm is strengthening. Earl is over pretty warm water, about 29 degrees Celsius. It's in the mid 80s for Fahrenheit. It is a pretty warm enough water for sure to sustain a tropical storm and fuel it. The wind shear is fairly light. It's less than 10 knots, and it is closing off away from that little bit of dry air that still is in the environment. So it looks like Earl is probably making that intensification run right now. And what we're probably seeing is the beginning of a major hurricane. Hurricane hunters will probably be in there a little bit later today. I think their afternoon mission had to be abandoned, or they've just gotten in there. But we'll find out later today, but by 5 or 11 p.m., Earl's probably going to be a Category 3 hurricane. As far as the impacts of Bermuda, I think tropical storm impacts are most likely. Again, Earl is supposed to pass about 75 miles, 75 to 100 miles to the southeast of Bermuda, so the heaviest winds will stay offshore. Colorado State's latest cross-section of the storm shows us that on the east side of the storm, those 50-knot tropical storm, the west side of Earl, which would be, which is east of Bermuda, those tropical storm force winds, the 50-knot wind radius is about 75 to 85 miles out. So Bermuda will be on the edge of the the upper end tropical storm force winds, a little rusty today. 34 knots is the beginning of tropical storm. That's about 40 miles an hour. 50 knots is about 60, 65 miles an hour. So they're on that threshold where they're going to get low end tropical storm force winds, and they're going to get some upper end tropical storm force winds sustained. But it does not appear that the hurricane force winds are probably going to get there. Earl should stay just far enough away, but would not be surprised if some gusts got to hurricane force. So Bermuda expecting a significant tropical storm, but not exactly expecting a full-on hurricane, even though Earl will be a major hurricane as it passes. So some impacts from Bermuda. Otherwise, Earl is going to get up and out of the picture. You can see by Saturday afternoon, it's expected to become post-tropical, denoted by those white markers right there, and be out of the picture for the Atlantic basin. So no other issues there. We go to Invest 95L behind Earl, and this thing got really close to tropical depression or storm status, man. This thing got real close, but I don't know if that window may not have closed. We can see this naked swirl on satellite imagery here this afternoon, but all the convection had blown off to the north and east, and those are where all the thunderstorms are right now. And you can see they're moving one way, and the eye is moving the other way, or the center of the storm. That's not what you want to see. We can clearly see the outline of a strong upper level trough in the region, these upper clouds moving in this general direction, showing that there's a good bit of wind shear and just a very dry environment overall. There's just not a lot of sustained activity. And you can see there's these little arc clouds popping out here and there, showing that the few storms that try to pop off are just have outflow boundaries racing all over the place. It's just a really dry environment. So the system is producing a pretty good swath of winds at tropical storm force, and it has a nice little closed center. I mean, it's spinning away, but there's just no thunderstorm activity to anchor it, so you still don't have all your classification you need for a tropical storm. So the Hurricane Center leaves this as a 70-80% chance that it could develop in the short term, because any sustained thunderstorm activity is going to trigger it to be named. But it looks like that window might be closing, because by the weekend, conditions are no longer expected to be favorable. It's only going to get harder for the storm. So if it doesn't pull itself together soon, it's not going to be named. So whether this becomes the next named storm or not remains to be seen. To me, it looks like the best may have passed for this thing, but we still have the overnight convective maximum. Maybe it picks up, maybe it doesn't. But we'll be watching that. And that wave behind it, moving off of Africa, not much to talk about yet. It's going to move off into the same environment this one's in, so it may have the same problem. Overall, though, the high pressure guiding these systems is pretty weak. You can see Earl has definitely eroded this side of the high, and this storm is trying to find that same entry out, and this one's kind of following the same path. So for now, the gate has been left open for these storms to just turn out and back to sea. So no impacts for the U.S. right now. We'll be watching that. Anything else, but no big deal. Otherwise, looking pretty good for us. We go over to Hurricane Kay in the eastern Pacific. This is a large system, although it may not be a hurricane anymore. The latest from from the NOAA hurricane hunters tell us that maybe this is already a tropical storm, but a big hurricane. It was for the last couple of days, paralleling the coast of the Baja Peninsula today from along Mexico's coast. Maximum sustained winds last check were 80 miles an hour, and the movement to the north-northwest at 15 miles an hour. You can see again tropical storm and hurricane warning still up for much of the region. California, of course, is right here, so we're looking at a storm passing pretty close to California, which is exceptionally rare for this region, but not expected to actually impact California directly, although indirect impacts will be felt. Satellite presentation of K shows the system beginning to rapidly weaken, and most of the convection's off to one side of the eye right now, the center of the storm somewhere right about here. As it moves up, and spreading a lot of rainfall into the region, and also tropical storm force winds. It's a big storm. It's just not very well put together anymore. The water temperatures get much colder very quickly up here. There's a very sharp drop off from the warm tropics to the eastern Pacific and the colder waters to the north, because cold currents come down the west coast from like Alaska and stuff. That cold water rotates clockwise, so it comes down by California. We know the California coast, it's always cool because the water's cool, and then it trails back off in the Pacific. So these storms move up here, and then they immediately run out of cold or warm water, and they get zapped almost immediately. Kind of what Kay is doing. Afternoon Hurricane Hunter pass, 979 millibars, not a very super low pressure for the size of the storm, and we can see the SFMR winds all showing tropical storm force winds, no hurricane force winds reported from K today. So it may already be a tropical storm, but regardless, we're going to see a lot of moisture associated with K moving up. You see all this kind of moisture field expanding with K as all that moisture surges in. Right now, it's being guided by high pressure over the central U.S., pushing it more northward. But as the forecast goes on, she'll move away, and then this high building off the coast of California will begin to push her back down to the south. So she'll kind of do this kind of little looping motion and move out and away. But that will surge a lot of moisture into Southern California. This is set for Saturday early morning. You can see Kay centered as close as she'll probably get to California's coastline, just about 100, 120 miles off the coast. And there's a lot of moisture associated with this. Now, this is good because it's breaking what was a pretty impressive heat wave over the region, one of the most record heat waves we've seen for September. Kay is going to move up and get rid of some of that, and all this moisture is going to lead to some rainfall for Southern California. Beneficial for sure, but could be some localized flooding as these tropical systems tend to dump a lot of rain, more than they typically would get in a more typical, weather system that would move through. So welcome rain, definitely welcome as far as the mega drought that is ongoing across the Southwest, but could see some flooding and impacts from that as Kay moves through. Tropical storm force winds should stay offshore. Kay should be rapidly weakening by this point, but could be pretty breezy and definitely rainy across Southern California over the weekend. So that's something to watch out for. And finally, overseas, we have a tropical storm. Mufia, I think is how you'd pronounce that. And this system expected to become a typhoon sooner than later by tomorrow afternoon, and forecasted peak around 110 knots, which is about 120, 125 miles an hour, getting that category 3 to 4 range. And these southern islands of Japan that just got hammered by Typhoon Hineminor for several days are going to get another direct impact as the system's going to move across, and by the weekend will impact the islands and then likely begin to recurve in some fashion. So all of these areas that got hit by Hineminor are going to be looking at a second system moving through there, so not good news. So active time in the tropics right now, but thankfully for the eastern U.S., it is quiet as far as actual threats go. There are really nothing on the horizon, like I said, we're going to watch that Gulf of Mexico just in case something bubbles up out of there, but all these systems you see out in the central Atlantic and whatnot are fish food, so nothing tracking for the next several days, and this strange hurricane season marches on. So that's what I got for you guys today on your daily tropical update. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.